Myo renge kyo nam. Myo renge kyo nam. Myo renge kyo. Hello everyone. Well, today is an important day, and we are going to start a series on one of probably the most significant writings of Nichiren. I'll start with a series just straight out of the Gosho, and we'll talk about it. It's a long one, so it's going to take a few videos to cover, I'm sure. And I may then, I don't know, depends on how this goes. I may do an entire series on other translations and other writings based on this Gosho. But if you have questions about why is there such struggle, animosity, disdain between Hinayana and Mahayana, it will be addressed in this Gosho. If you have questions about why the Lotus Sutra is the utmost teaching of Buddhism, this Gosho will leave no doubt. If you have questions about the meaning of Myoho Renge Kyo, that too will be deeply covered in this Gosho. The entire history of Nichiren, the lineage of Buddhism, even the lifetime of Shakyamuni Buddha himself, Siddhartha Gautama, that also will be discussed in this Gosho. Perhaps already, if you should have some idea of the scope and the profundity of this writing. So that alone should suggest that it's not a mere note or short letter. This is quite a discourse, quite a treatise, if you will, on the entirety of Buddhist scholarship. And so, buckle up. The opening of the eyes. Succinct and yet doesn't quite state the scope of this Gosho. So, let us begin. Part 1. There are 3 categories of people that all human beings should respect. They are the sovereign, the teacher, and the parent. There are 3 types of doctrines that are to be studied. They are Confucianism, Brahmanism, and Buddhism. Now, right off the bat, why would a preeminent scholar of Buddhism tell you to study 3 other types of doctrines, or 2 others? You'll see why I said 3 later. And this is, again, something I've repeated often online in forums and so forth, that one of Shakyamuni's great exhortation to his students was to study broadly, not just the entirety, and he meant the entirety of Buddhist scholarship, but also non-Buddhist. All of this will be explained as we go on. Nichiren really, in this Gosho, as he does in most treatises, but certainly exemplarily so in this one, sets up a perception only to then dismantle it and chew it up and give it to you in a way that you can perceive it more deeply, more detailed. So, without further ado, Confucianism described the 3 sovereigns, the 5 emperors, and the 3 kings, whom it calls the honorable ones from heaven. These men are depicted as the heads of the government officials and bridges for the populace. In the age before the 3 sovereigns, people were no better than birds and beasts in that they did not even know who their own fathers were. But from the time of the 5 emperors on, they came to know who their fathers and mothers were, treating them according to the dictates of filial piety. Thus, Cheng Hua served his father with reverence, though the latter was stubborn and hard-headed. Also, the governor of Pei, after he became the emperor, continued to pay great respect to his father, the venerable Sire. King Wu of the Zhou dynasty made a wooden image of his father, the Earl of the West, and Ting Lan fashioned a statue of his mother. All of these men are models of filial piety. The High Minister Pican, seeing that the Yin dynasty was on the path to ruin, strongly admonished the ruler, though it cost him his head. Heng Yen, finding that his lord Duke Yi had been killed, cut open his own stomach and inserted the duke's liver in it before he died. These men may serve as models of loyalty. Consider the time and the storytelling here. Yin Shu was the teacher of Emperor Yao. Wu Cheng was the teacher of Emperor Shun. Dai Gong Wang was the teacher of King Wen. And Lao Tzu was the teacher of Confucius. These teachers are known as the 4 sages. Now he's talking about teachers, right? Even the honorable ones of heaven bow their heads to them in respect, and all people press their palms together in reverence. Sages such as these have left behind writings that run to over 3,000 volumes in such works as the 3 records, the 5 canons, and the 3 histories. But all these writings, in the end, do not advance beyond the 3 mysteries. The first of the 3 mysteries is being. This is the principle taught by the Duke of Chao and others. The second mystery is non-being, which was expounded by Lao Tzu. The third is both being and non-being, which is the mystery set forth by Chuang Tzu. Mystery denotes darkness. Some say that if we ask what existed before our ancestors were born, we will find that life was born out of the primal force, while others declare that eminence and ignobility, joy and sorrow, right and wrong, gain and loss occur simply as part of the natural order. By the way, these are still contemporary thoughts. What do we call energy that we don't understand in science today? Dark energy, dark matter. We know it's there. We just don't know how to perceive it directly. These are theories that are cleverly argued, but that fail to take cognizance of either the past or the future. Mystery, as we have seen, means darkness or obscurity, and it is for this reason that it is called mystery. It is a theory that deals with matters only in terms of the present. Speaking in terms of the present, the Confucians declare that one should abide by the principles of benevolence and righteousness, and thereby ensure safety to oneself and peace and order to the state. If one departs from these principles, they say, then one's family will be doomed and one's house overthrown. But although the wise and worthies who preach this doctrine are acclaimed by or as sages, In their lack of knowledge about the past, they are like ordinary people, unable to see their own backs. And in their understanding about the future, they are like a blind man, unable to see what lies before him. If, in terms of the present, one brings order to one's family, carries out the demands of filial piety, and resolute mind to fully practice the 5 constant virtues, and then one's associates will respect one, and one's name will become known throughout the country. If there is a worthy ruler on the throne, he will invite such a person to become his minister or his teacher, or may even cede his position to him. Heaven too will come to protect and watch over such a person. Such were the so-called 5 elders, who gathered about and assisted King Wu of the Zhou dynasty, or the 28 generals of Emperor Kwang Wu, of the later Han, who were likened to the 28 constellations of the sky. But since such persons know nothing about the past or the future, they cannot assist their parents, their sovereign, or their teacher in making provisions for their future lives, and they are therefore unable to repay the debt they owe them. Such persons are not true worthies or sages. Confucius declared that there were no worthies or sages in his country, but that in the land to the west there was one named Buddha, who was a sage. This indicates that non-Buddhist texts should be regarded as a first step toward Buddhist doctrine. Confucius first taught propriety in music, so that when the Buddhist scriptures were brought to China, the concepts of the precepts, meditation, and wisdom could be more readily grasped. He taught the ideals of ruler and minister so that the distinction between superior and subordinate would be made clear. He taught the ideal of parenthood so that the importance of filial piety could be appreciated. And he explained the ideal of the teacher so that people might learn to follow. The great teacher Miao Lo says, "The propagation of Buddhism truly depends on this. First, the teachings of propriety and music were set forth, and later the true way was introduced." Tendai states, quote, "In the Golden Light Sutra it is recorded that all the good teachings that exist in the world derive from this sutra. To have a profound knowledge of this world is itself Buddhism." End quote. In Great Concentration and Insight, we read, quote, "I, the Buddha, have dispatched the 3 sages to educate the land of China." End quote. In the annotations on Great Concentration and Insight, we read, quote, "The practice of the Pure Law Sutra states that Bodhisattva Moonlight appeared in that land under the name Yen Hui. Bodhisattva Bright Pure appeared there as Confucius, and Bodhisattva Kashyapa appeared as Lao Tzu. Since the sutra is speaking from the point of view of India, it refers to China as that land." End quote. Secondly, we come to the non-Buddhist teachings of India. In Brahmanism, we find the 2 deities Shiva, who has 3 eyes and 8 arms, and Vishnu. They are hailed as the loving father and compassionate mother of all living beings and are so called the honorable ones of heaven and sovereigns. In addition, there are 3 men, Kapila, Uluka, and Rishabha, who are known as the 3 ascetics. These ascetics lived somewhere around 800 years before the time of the Buddha. The teachings expounded by the 3 ascetics are known as the 4 Vedas and number 60,000. Later, in the time of the Buddha, there were the 6 non-Buddhist teachers who studied and transmitted these non-Buddhist scriptures and acted as tutors to the kings of the 5 regions of India. Their teachings split into 95 or 96 different lines, forming school after school. The banners of their pride were raised higher than the heaven where there is neither thought nor no thought. And their dogmatic rigidity was harder than metal or stone. But in their skill and depth of understanding, they surpassed anything known in Confucianism. They were able to perceive 2, 3, or even 7 existences, a period of 80,000 kalpas into the past, and they were likewise knew what would happen 80,000 kalpas in the future. As the fundamental principle of their doctrine, some of these schools taught that cause produce effects. Others taught that causes do not produce effects, while still others taught that causes both do and do not produce effects. Effects, I should be careful to say. Such were the fundamental principles of these non-Buddhist schools. The devout followers of the non-Buddhist teachings observe the 5 precepts and the 10 good precepts, practice the kind of meditation that is still accompanied by outflows, and ascending to the worlds of form and formlessness. Believe they have attained nirvana when they reach the highest of the heavens. But although they make their way upward bit by bit, like an inchworm, they fall back from the heaven when there is neither thought nor no thought, and descend instead into the 3 evil paths. Not a single one succeeds in remaining on the level of the heavens, though they believe that once having attained that level, they will never descend from it. Excuse me. Each approves and practices the doctrines taught by his teacher and firmly abides by them. Thus, some of them bathe 3 times a day in the Ganges, even on cold winter days, while others pull out the hairs on their head, fling themselves against rocks, expose themselves to fire, burn their bodies, or go about stark naked. You may remember the video I did on the monks who burn themselves in effigy. It's a non-Buddhist practice. Again, there are those who believe they can gain good fortune by sacrificing many horses, or who burn grasses and trees, or make obeisance to every tree they encounter. Erroneous teachings such as these are too numerous to be counted. Their adherents pay as much respect and honor to these teachers who propound them as the heavenly deities pay to the Lord Chakra, or to the court ministers pay to the ruler of the empire. But not a single person who adheres to these 95 types of higher or lower non-Buddhist teachings have ever escaped from the cycle of birth and death. Those who follow teachers of the better sort will, after 2 or 3 rebirths, fall into the evil paths, while those who follow evil teachers will fall into the evil paths in their very next rebirth. And as you know, we're talking moment to moment, right? And yet the main point of these non-Buddhist teachings constitutes an important means of entry into Buddhism. Some of them state, quote, 1,000 years from now the Buddha will appear in the world, end quote. While others state, quote, 100 years from now the Buddha will appear into the world, end quote. The Nirvana Sutra remarks, quote, all of the non-Buddhist scriptures and writings in society are themselves Buddhist teachings, not non-Buddhist teachings, end quote. And in the Lotus Sutra it is written, and, quote, before the multitude they seem possessed of the 3 poisons or manifest the signs of distorted views. My disciples in this manner use expedient means to save all living beings, end quote. Expedient means. We cover that topic over and over again. It's basically how to expand the mind. How can we use what is the familiar to people, whether it's familiar by observation or familiar simply from inculcated cultural information. I don't want to call it knowledge because that implies a truth, and information isn't truth, it's simply information. Thirdly, we come to Buddhism. One should know that the world-honored one of great enlightenment is a great leader for all living beings, a great eye for them, a great bridge, a great helmsman, a great field of fortune. The four sages and three ascetics of the Confucian and the Brahmanical scriptures and teachings are referred to as sages, but in fact they are no more than ordinary people who have not yet been able to eradicate the three categories of illusion. They are referred to as wise men, but in fact are no more than infants who cannot understand the principles of cause and effect. With their teachings for a ship, could one ever cross over the sea of the sufferings of birth and death, the life of attachments from moment to moment? With their teachings for a bridge, could one ever escape from the maze of these six paths? But the Buddha, our great teacher, has advanced beyond the even transmigration with change and advance, let alone transmigration with differences and limitations. He has wiped out even the very root of fundamental darkness, let alone the illusions of thought and desire that are as minor as branches and leaves. This Buddha, from the time of his enlightenment, at the age of 30, until his passing at the age of 80, expounded his sacred teachings for a period of 50 years. Each word, each phrase he spoke is true. Not a sentence, not a verse is false. The words of the sages and worthies perceived in these scriptures and teachings of Confucianism and Brahmanism, as we have noted, are free of error, and the words match the spirit in which they were spoken. But how much more true is this the case of the Buddha, who had spoken not a false word for countless kalpas? In comparison to the non-Buddhist scriptures and teachings, the doctrines that he expounded in a period of 50 or so years represent a great vehicle, the true words of the great man. Everything that he preached from the dawn of his enlightenment until the evening that he entered into nirvana is none other than the truth. Now hang on to that. There's a reason Nichiren is slowly evolving this scholarship of Buddhism. It's not the end-all be-all. There's a lot more to go here. But that will be a good start to the opening of the eyes. Please read it, reread it, listen to this video, ask me questions. We'll probably cover a lot of what's going through your head right now in the future pages of this Go Show. It's voluminous and it's very profound. But as you can already see, history is Nichiren's tool. He can quote chapter and verse. He can quote time periods and the histories of multiple countries. He traces the entire scholarship of Buddhism from long before its inception to the Vedic. This is very, very interesting, and it's not overly technical. Keep in mind, this is all expedient means. So anyway, we'll go more into that. I appreciate you going on this journey with me more than you know. It gives me an opportunity to refresh my own practice, which is essential, because I am, after all, just a human man. I want to be more. I want to help you be more. Thank you, my Sangha. Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. Until the next one, take care.